Hi, my name is Helen Molesworth, and I'm the Chief Curator of the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles. I'm also one of the organizers of Kerry James Marshall Mastery, a 35-year survey exhibition of this extraordinary American painter's work. Organized in collaboration with the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York and the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago, while the show is on view at MOCA, I'm actually able to take you on an amazing virtual reality tour. Hi, my name is We're standing in the first gallery of the Kerry James Marshall exhibition. I think it's really important to know a few things about Marshall's biography because they play a huge role in the extraordinary paintings he would go on to make throughout his adult life. Marshall was born in 1955 in Birmingham, Alabama, which means that he was 8 years old when the KKK bombed the 16th Street Baptist Street Church, killing 4 small black school girls. Birmingham, Alabama was small, and most families who were African American knew of the families or knew the actual girls who were killed. And Kerry James Marshall and his family were no exception. In response to that violence, Kerry James Marshall's parents moved him and his 3 siblings to Los Angeles in search. As we walk into this next gallery of the exhibition, you'll notice a few things right away. One is that the paintings have gotten much larger and much more complex. You'll also notice that they're hung on the wall with grommets and screws. They're not actually real paintings in a way. One of the reasons Marshall did this was because as a young artist, he was painting in a very small studio, and sometimes he didn't even have a studio. He was actually just painting in his home, in his kitchen. Once you put a painting on stretcher bars, they become very large and very hard to move, and all of these paintings would have been larger than the doorway of the house that Kerry was living in. His solution to this problem was not to put the painting on stretchers, and simply to paint with the canvas directly tacked to the wall. This meant that when the painting was over, he could roll up the painting, put it under the bed, or carry it out the front door himself. The other thing you'll notice is how many pictures there are in this gallery of people in love. One of the most important things about Kerry James Marshall's work is that he was really interested in trying to figure out how to make paintings of everyday Black life. One of the most important things to him was to show Black people falling in love and being in normal domestic houses. He was interested in what he called Black normalcy. So not Black people as exceptional or magical or pathological or criminal, but Black people as everyday people, people who meet, who fall in love, who have children, who raise. This final room of the exhibition brings 2 very different versions of history together. On the one hand, you have Baobab Ensemble. In the center of the room, what you see are all of Kerry James Marshall's image clippings. He has allowed us to spread them out all over the floor, and so that viewers can pick them up and touch them and look at them. What we see when we look at these pictures is the history of Western culture laid out on the ground. Images of African sculpture, images taken from popular magazines, pictures of famous paintings. This is the collective archive of pictures that we all share. The other version of history in the room are a bunch of paintings that Kerry made up from his own imagination. The history of African American life in this country is a history of omissions and absences. And one of the things that Kerry has done is invent different pictures of historical moments that we don't actually have images of. Painting has been around for 600 years, and yet it's really only in the 20th century, and even then in the late 20th century, that we come to know of a group of identifiable Black artists. As we walk into this room, you might be struck by a common color palette that many of these paintings share: red, black, green. These colors are the colors of the Pan-African flag. The history of the Pan-African flag is that it was a flag meant to symbolize the diversity and strength of the African nations and the African diaspora. Red was meant to symbolize blood and sacrifice, black, the color of the people, and green, the fertility of Africa. Untitled Studio is one of Kerry James Marshall's most complex paintings to date. We know we are in Untitled Club Couple. Kerry James Marshall brings us right into the present. Made in 2014, the painting has a square format and a speed and a lightness that brings to mind iPhone photographs and their posting on Instagram. What do we see? We see a young and very attractive, stylishly dressed couple sitting in what we imagine to be a club. The disco ball appears to be casting its sparkly lights on the wall. Their drinks match, and her clutch handbag partakes in one of the oldest painterly tricks in the book. It just hangs off the edge of that table to indicate that this is three-dimensional space, even though this painting is as flat can be. They hold hands and their sunglasses rest next to them. We know something she does not. If you look carefully on the right-hand side of that, by now, you may begin to realize that Kerry James Marshall has been working his way through all of the different types of Western painting and inserting Black figures into them. We've seen landscape painting, domestic genre scenes, history painting, and portraiture. Here, we also see the nude and love scenes called fêtes galantes, which were invented in France in the 18th century. One of Marshall's primary activities as an artist has been to ensure that every single type of painting had Black people in it, so that no one could ever say that they didn't exist. It was important for Marshall to basically infiltrate the museum with paintings of Black subjectivity. Kerry James Marshall is known primarily as a painter, but there really isn't any way to be a painter in the late 20th and early 21st century and not deal with photography. The art of hanging pictures is one of Marshall's most interesting and difficult forays into that realm. On this large wall, we see an array of photographs framed and installed. They're framed in lots of different ways and installed in lots of different ways. The pictures themselves are very workaday. None is particularly dramatic. When we enter this gallery, we see a fabulous standoff. On the one hand, a great picture of a barber shop called The Style, and on the other hand, an amazing painting of a beauty parlor called School of Beauty, School of Culture. These two paintings form a kind of companion piece, and they exemplify some of the most amazing attributes of Kerry James Marshall's work. De Style was painted in 1993 and is the painting of the barbershop. In it, we see 5 guys looking straight at us. Most of them have incredible haircuts. These guys have it going on. The interior is the barbershop. And I have to say what I think is happening here is Kerry James Marshall is starting to show off a little bit. Not only does he show us every little thing in the barbershop, from the paper towels to the radio to the combs to the little bit of a picture of Muhammad Ali, he also shows us everything in the barbershop reflected in the mirror. In this regard, Kerry James Marshall is not only giving us a kind of glimpse into everyday life, but he's also showing us how much he can do as a painter. Other extraordinary thing in this picture is that if you look closely, you'll see that the barber has a halo. De Style was painted in 1993 and is the painting of the barbershop. In it, we see 5 guys looking straight at us. Most of them have incredible haircuts. These guys have it going on. The interior is the barbershop. And I have to say what I think is happening here is Kerry James Marshall is starting to show off a little bit. Not only does he show us School of Beauty, School of Culture, made in 2012, so almost 10 years after De Style, is the companion piece to De Style because it's the beauty parlor. If De Style gave us the classic male's barbershop, De Style, School of Beauty, School of Culture, made in 2012, so almost 10 years after De Style, is the companion. In the mid-1990s, Kerry James Marshall set out to make a suite of paintings that dealt with the problem of public housing in the United States. It was a really interesting time to take on such a challenge, because during the 1990s, our country was having a fairly in-depth discussion about what to do about public housing. Public housing was seen to be in a state of crisis. Public housing was seen to be a site of drugs, crime, and general disrepair. Marshall was living and working on the south side of Chicago, and from his studio he could see the towers of Cabrini Green. At the time, Cabrini Green was the poster child for everything that was wrong with public housing. However, in the mid-1990s, Kerry James Marshall set out to make a suite of paintings that dealt with the problem of public housing in the United States. It was a really interesting time to take on such a challenge, because during the 1990s, our country was having a fairly in-depth discussion about what to do about public housing. Public housing was seen to be in a state of crisis. Public housing was seen to be a site of drugs, crime, and general disrepair. Marshall was living and working on the south side of Chicago, and from his studio he could see the towers of Cabrini Green. At the time, Cabrini Green was the poster child for everything that was wrong with public housing. However, Marshall had memories of public housing that were really different from the conversation that was being had in the 1990s. As a young boy, his family had moved into the Nickerson Gardens public housing project in the Watts neighborhood of Los Angeles. He remembered housing that was brand new. He remembered a toy library where children were allowed to check out toys. He remembered a common green space where all the kids were able to play. And he remembered adults planting their gardens, tending to their flowers, and a general sense of well-being, and that public housing was a good thing. It was, in fact, a utopian space, the kind of utopian space that so many people imagined it would be when they started building public housing in the 1930s through the 1960s. Kerry James Marshall is known primarily as a painter, but there really isn't any way to be a painter in the late 20th and early 21st century and not deal with photography. The art of hanging pictures is one of Marshall's most interesting and difficult forays into that realm. On this large wall, we see an array